dB is 10 log. We saw that dB is defined as 10 log P2 upon P1, and Napier was, of course, natural log of V2 upon V1, and we did a lot of derivations and some sample calculations as well. Today, let me quickly solve a few problems. Some of them will seem very trivial, but still worth looking at. Question number 1, I hope some of you can give me the answer right away. Minus 28.8 dBm, how many dBWs would it be? There is a definite relationship between dBm and dBW for the same power level. dBm value is 30 dB higher than the dBW value. So the answer, you'll be getting all this. The answer to question 1 is minus 58.8 dBW. What we have done is we have taken minus 28.8 dBm and subtracted 30 from that. Second question, 22 dBW into dBm. That's the other way around. Can somebody give me the answer?
52.
52 dBm, exactly. Perfect. So that's the second answer. Plus 52 dBm. Third question involves a bit of calculation. Convert 22 dBW power into milliwatt. 20 dBW means the power 22 number will be equated to 10 log P upon 1 watt. And then you have to solve that equation. Here we go.
Excuse me, sir. Third question is not
Yes.
visible. Sir, third question
Question is not visible?
Yes, sir.
Question or answer?
Sir, question.
Can you? I'll tell you again. Convert 22 dBW into milliwatt. You got it? (22 dBW) has to be converted to milliwatt. That is question number 3. I'll soon be getting a tablet, so this visibility issue will be gone, I hope, after that. 22 dBW should be equated to 10 log of unknown power divided by 1 watt. And that needs to be solved. So P, the unknown power, works out to 158.49 watts approximately. 158.49 watts. And in milliwatts, of course, you get the number by multiplying this result by 1000. All right. If there is a mistake in my calculations, I'll correct the document. Most likely there is not any mistake. Okay. Fourth problem says convert 12 picowatt into dBm. "12 picowatt needs to be converted to dBm."
Sir, can you please scroll down the slide?
Sir, we cannot see the screen.
You cannot see the screen? That's
Means you
surprising.
can scroll down the screen.
Okay, this is it. Question number 4. Can you see it?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Cannot see.
Sir, can you present it again, please, sir?
Okay. Something. Okay, I'll go back to presenting again. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But anyway, take question 4 from me and try to solve it. 12 picowatt needs to be converted into dBm. Try doing that. Let me go back in the meantime. Let me start presenting again.
Now, okay, sir.
Good. Okay, perfect. Question number 4 is what I'm trying to solve. You may need a few minutes, I know. On the receiving side, in any communication system, powers are very low, and this is one example. You can even get picowatt powers, especially when you're talking about long distances in satellite communication, where the satellite could be almost 38,000 kilometers away from the surface of the Earth. The power levels received at the satellite can be of picowatt type. Mars is even further away, so powers are in picowatt there. Anybody got the answer? Maybe you don't have calculators, but please bring your calculators from next time on. I'll show you the solution. I don't think it's a major issue conceptually. Here it is. Can you see it?
Sir, minus 79.2. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's what I got. Minus 79.21 dBm approximately. So some of you at least have got the basic idea of how to do these kind of calculations. And the last question is question 4, but the answer must now be in dBW. So the answer you got in question 4, from there you subtract 30.
Minus 109.21.
Yep. That's it. Minus 109.21 dBW. That's the order, which is very low power, and special techniques have to be deployed to make sense out of such a low power. But okay, this is one set of problems. Now I'm going to close this document and do a second set of problems, slightly more involved. Give me a minute. Question 1, let me read it out also. A power amplifier takes an input power of 13.8 milliwatt, 13.8 nanowatt, 13.8 nanowatt. That's the input power, 13.8 nanowatt, and amplifies that power at its output port to plus 10 dBW power. The output power is plus 10 dBW. Input power is 13.8 nanowatt. Calculate the power gain in dB, in Napers, and on the absolute scale. That means no logarithms. There's more than one method, by the way, to solve this, but you can try whichever way you want to do it. Since input power is given in absolute value, you can maybe convert the output power in absolute value and simply divide the output power by input power to get the gain on absolute scale. That can be one method. And once you get the gain on absolute scale, do 10 log operation on that gain to get the gain in dB. And once you get dB value, you know how to convert to Napers. How much is output power in the absolute sense, in watts, I mean?
Sir, 10. Sir, 10 volt.
Anyone?
Sir,
So
is the
20,
gain
20.5,
88.6?
Output power is 10
20.5,
watt. Input power is
20.5.
13.8 multiplied by 10 raised to the power minus 9 watts.
Sir, is the answer 88.6?
The ratio can be easily calculated, and gain turns out to be a very large value on the absolute scale. 724637681.2. To convert that gain into dB, you take log of this number and multiply it by 10. You should get 88.60 dB gain. And then you know how to convert it into Napers. You divide the dB value by 8.6859. That should give you around 10.2 Napers. That's one way of looking at the problem. The second method could be you take the input power and convert it into dBm. 13.8 into 10 raised to the power minus 9 divided by 10 raised to the power minus 3 log of that multiplied by 10 should give you minus 48.6 dBm input power. And output power is in 10 dBW, which becomes 40 dBm. Subtract the two to get the gain in dB directly. 40 dBm minus 48.6 dBm. That also gives you the same answer. Okay. One problem, the last one. Here the component is opposite of an amplifier. In an amplifier, the output power is larger compared to the input power. In the attenuator, it's the other way around. This component is being fed with 100 watt input and it is producing 27 watt at the output. Obviously, gain has to be less than 1. Gain has to be 27 divided by 100 on the absolute scale, which is 0.27. Attenuation on the absolute scale is 100 divided by 27, input upon output. They want gain and attenuation in dB as well as on the absolute scale. So let me show you the answer. It's fairly straightforward in this case. Input power is, let me see again. I hope the number is right. Input power is 100 watt. Yeah, 100 watt. If you take the dBW value, it would be 10 log 100 divided by 1, which is 20 dBW, yes, which becomes 50 dBm. So input power is 50 dBm, output power is 27 watt, I think. That converted to dBm will give you this number. Gain is input power in dBm minus output power in dBm. So you get a negative gain. It's not an amplifier. Attenuation is the same value as gain, but minus sign is gone. Okay. Attenuation is plus 5.6854 dB. Gain is minus 6.6864 dB. And on the absolute scale, I have already told you the answers are 0.27 for the gain and 1 upon 0.27 for the attenuation. Okay. Hope you get some idea of how to apply these things. Now let me move on to another document where we will now start talking about, yes, I think you guys got the numbers right, good. Now with this background, let me move forward. I was mentioning last time that there is a concept called network parameters. What happens is in a large communication system or in any large system, you have a very large number of components, resistance, inductance, capacitance, transistors, and many other components, connectors, cables, etc., etc. If you want to do an accurate analysis using Kirchhoff's current law, Kirchhoff's voltage law, Ohm's law, etc., etc., the number of equations that you will need to solve will be very large. And that's almost impossible, not fully impossible, but almost impossible. So an alternate method has been brought in to analyze large systems. What we do is, conceptually speaking, for each major component, we describe the input-output behavior, assuming that we know nothing about the insides of the component. We test the component separately and describe input-output behavior through a model. It is called a black box approach. Without knowing what's inside, we still write parameters to describe the behavior of that particular component. And then we add many of these components in series, in parallel, in cascade to come to the final system. So the number of equations that you need to solve becomes less because each component is described using fictitious parameters. This is a technique that is actually used in most of the simulation tools, multisim, etc., etc. They don't solve any problem going down to KCL, KVL, etc. So let me open one document to get this going. Can you see this document?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Network parameters are not actual parameters in the sense that there is no component inside with those values. This is a hypothetical description of the behavior of a given component. What we do is we describe the relationship between input and output using linear equations. Last time I was mentioning to you that input terminals, two of them taken together, are known as one port, input port, and the output terminals taken together are defined as the output port, the port number 2. Networks can have more than 2 ports also. In fact, some networks have only 1 port also, and some can have 4, some can have 5 also. But we would restrict ourselves for now to two-port networks. The use of network, there's a bit of omission here in the sentence. The use of network parameters. Let me go through it once again. The use of network parameters rather than the use of network. I'll make that correction before I send you the document. The use of network parameters greatly simplifies the analysis and synthesis of large systems. The difference between analysis and synthesis is that analysis means you are given a system or given a component, you try to figure out its behavior. Synthesis or design means you have nothing to start with. You create something out of nothing. You are told that you need this functionality. How do you go about realizing it? That is called synthesis. Okay. But the mathematics, at least to begin with, is not very different in both cases. The parameters that we will be looking at are at least four. The fifth one I'm going to ignore. Impedance parameters, which are known as Z parameters. Admittance parameters, which are also known as Y parameters. Transmission parameters, which are also known as ABCD parameters, and scattering parameters, which are also known as S parameters. Hybrid parameters are also there, which are normally reserved for semiconductor devices, so I will not go into them too much. Okay. Essentially speaking, this is what I was telling you about, that a two-port network can be written as a rectangular symbol where input voltage V1 and input current I1 versus output voltage V2 and output current I2. That relationship can be written using some fictitious parameters. You have got four variables, two input and two output, V1 I1 and V2 I2. Out of those four, you choose two as independent variables and the remaining two as dependent variables. And based on the choice, a different type of parameters come in. If I choose both the currents as independent variables, I1 and I2 as independent variables, and describe V1 and V2 as functions of I1 and I2, then what I get is the so-called impedance parameters. Equation 1 and 2, maybe you can note them down. V1 is written as Z11 I1 plus Z12 I2, and V2 is written as Z21 I1 plus Z22 I2, where Z11, Z12, Z21, and Z22 are the fictitious parameters governing the overall behavior of this network. As I said, the values of Z11, Z12, Z21, Z22 will actually depend on what's inside the network, but they will not be equal to any of the particular component inside. Okay. Now, this kind of relationship can be put in matrix form also, like I'm showing here in equation 3, where V matrix is known as voltage matrix. It has two elements. I matrix is known as current matrix. That also has two elements, I1 and I2. And Z matrix is a square matrix containing four elements, Z11, Z12, Z21, and Z22. Now, how would you measure these parameters in the lab for a given network? Look at the defining equations. In equation 1, how is Z11 defined? Suppose I make I2 equal to 0 and take the ratio V1 to I1. I should get Z11. Under the condition I2 equal to 0, the ratio V1 divided by I1 should give me Z11, right? That is the way the equation is. And I2 equal to 0 means you open circuit the output so that no current is there in the output. So practically speaking, a given network, if you want to figure out its Z11, you simply open the output and take the ratio of V1 upon I1. Z22 also can be done in a similar manner, but now the role of ports is reversed. Z22 is V2 upon I2 when I1 is 0. That means I open circuit the input and apply some voltage V2 to the output and see and measure the current going in. The ratio of those two should give me Z22. By the way, in general, V1, V2, I1, I2, Z11, Z12, Z21, Z22 can all be complex numbers in general. In particular cases, they may be real numbers also. How about Z12? Z12 can be obtained under the condition when I1 is 0 and you take the ratio V1 upon I2. And in a similar manner, Z21 is V2 upon I1 when I2 is 0. So basically, open circuits need to be created for measuring these parameters in the lab or even for theoretical analysis. These are fictitious parameters which govern the behavior of the network. These are the 4 definitions. Measurement of these parameters requires the use of open circuits at both inputs and outputs. Zero current means open circuits. Okay. Obviously, the unit for all these parameters is ohm because they are the ratio of voltage and current. Z11 and Z22 are local parameters in the sense that they are dealing with one particular port. Z11 relates to port 1, Z22 relates to port 2. On the other hand, Z12 and Z21, they describe the transfer characteristic of the network. What happens from between port 1 and port 2 and port 2 and port 1 is taken care of by Z12 and Z21. In many books, you will see the word self-impedance used for Z11 and Z22, and the word transfer impedances for the other two. Okay. Now let's apply this theory to a given network. Determine the Z parameters of the 2-port T network shown below. It's a T network because you see that 3 impedances are connected at a T, making a T junction, okay, in a manner so that they make a T junction. So the word is T network. If you have this network in front of you and you want to figure out Z11, use the definition. You should open circuit the output and take the ratio V1 to I1. What will be the answer? If you open circuit the output, there are 3 impedances. ZA and ZB are the series impedances and ZC is the parallel one. Okay. If I open circuit the output, what will be the ratio V1 to I1? Obviously, it would be ZA plus ZC because no current is flowing in ZB. The circuit would reduce to simply a series combination of ZA and ZC. So Z11 is pretty easy to figure out. If I know ZA and ZC, I can, in theory, predict Z11. Z12 is a little more involved. Z12 definition is V1 divided by I2 when I1 is 0. So you have to redraw the network with I1 equal to 0. That means input is open. If input is open, I've drawn this sketch here. If input is open, V1 would appear across ZC because there is no drop across ZA. Now you apply basic circuit theory. You write these two equations. I don't think there is a mistake. Keep in mind the directions. Both currents are assumed to be going in. That is the way the theory goes. So with that in mind, I've got two equations written here, and the ratio V1 to I2 turns out to be ZC in this case. So Z12 is ZC. Once you get the document, you can go through it once again. Make sure you get this. Z21 is the third one, which is V2 divided by I1 when I2 is 0. It's quite similar to what we did for Z12. And in this case also, the answer turns out to be ZC. And the last one is Z22, which is fairly straightforward. V2 upon I2 ratio when I1 is 0. When I1 is 0, V2 upon I2 will be simply ZB plus ZC. So the four parameters can be predicted using basic circuit theory for this particular network. For other networks, the answers will be different, obviously. This particular case shows that Z12 and Z21 are equal. In that case, it has been shown that the network is reciprocal in the sense that port 1 and port 2 can be interchanged without affecting anything. There's a theory behind it, but just take it from me. If Z12 and Z21 are equal, the network is supposed to be reciprocal. Input and output can be interchanged without affecting anything. Also, if Z11 and Z22 are equal, which is not the case here, if that is the case, then network is called symmetric. That is not true in this case anyway. So this is problem 1. Let's see how much we have. Now, a particular application of these results. Problem 2. It's a purely resistive network, so answers will be real numbers. You are given a T network where the series resistances are both 8.56 ohm and the parallel resistance is 141.8 ohm. You can either use the values in the formulas that we obtained in problem 1, because this is a special case of problem 1, or you can do everything ab initio. It's up to you. I have done using what I got in problem 1. ZA is 8.56 ohm, ZB is also 8.56 ohm, ZC is 141.8 ohm. So using the results from the previous problem, I'm able to write Z11 as 150.36 ohm, Z12 and Z21 both equal to 141.8 ohm, and Z22 equal to 150.36 ohm. Note that Z11 and Z22 are not equal. So it's not a symmetric, oh sorry, they are equal. So it's a symmetric network, this particular one, because both the series resistances are equal. That's why the symmetricity is there. If the two series resistances were not equal, symmetricity would not have been there. But in that case also reciprocity would have been there, because Z12 and Z21 are always equal for a T network. Okay. Now this network is how an attenuator is realized. At least one method of realizing attenuators is using T networks of these kinds. The output power for this network will be less than the input power based on the values of the resistances. So this is actually an attenuator you are looking at. Problem 3 says that for the network in problem 2, calculate the input impedance when the output port is terminated with 50 ohm. Now this can be tackled in two different ways. We know what is inside the network. So maybe one technique is that you use circuit theory without worrying about Z11, Z22, etc. Directly go to the network that is given to you, put 50 ohm across the two output terminals and calculate V1 upon I1 ratio. That is one technique. The other technique is you use a black box representation of the network and go from there using the basic definitions of Z11, Z22, etc. And from there also you can figure out V1 upon I1. Both methods should lead to the same answer. Normally it is the second method that is used because it is not easy in large systems to know details about each and every component all the time. But for the sake of discussion, we can always do it using the first technique to begin with. If I take the given network and terminate its output into 50 ohm, this is what I get. You can do the calculations. The input impedance for this network is around 50 ohm. It's a well-known network. It is available in market actually. It's a 50 ohm attenuator that is sold by companies. That's what they have inside. So 50 ohm is the input impedance. Now suppose I didn't know what is inside. Then what would I do? But I know Z11, Z22, Z21, and Z12 for sure. That's all I know. I do not know anything else about the component. Then I do this. I describe the behavior of the component using this black box representation. I know in this particular case, this is a longer technique, but in principle, this is the technique that helps in simplifying analysis for large systems. Z11, Z12, Z21, Z22 values are already known to me. So I write this representation for the network. And then since I have put RL equal to 50 ohm across the two output terminals, and I2 is supposed to be going inside, that's the way theory begins. So using Ohm's law, V2 should be minus RL I2. And by definition, we know that V1 is Z11 I1 plus Z12 I2. V2 is Z21 I1 plus Z22 I2. And Zn is V1 upon I1. That is the way it is defined. So I use equation 1 in equation 3. And from there, I get I2 upon I1 ratio. Please check my derivation. I think I've not made a mistake, but in case there is a mistake, we'll always update the document. So I do this I2 by I1 ratio, and then I use equation for Zin, V1 upon I1, based on equation 2. So Zin will be Z11 I1 upon I1 plus Z12 I2 upon I1. Okay, and I2 upon I1 has been calculated separately. So plug that formula here. Zin turns out to be given by this equation in terms of Z11, Z12, Z21, Z22, rather than ZA, ZB, ZC. Double check my derivation, please. Okay. And of course, here also, once you got the formula, put the values, you should get 50 ohm. So two alternate techniques for figuring out the input impedance of this network. The second method, although it is little longer in this case, is generally the one that we go for, because it's not possible to know the details of each and every component all the time. Yeah. I'll stop this document. I think there's one more here. Okay. This problem I'll take next time. Okay. I think that's enough. Let me stop.